year was 2002, and the cafeteria of Westview Middle was a stock exchange of cardboard and ink for Akira. His deck was his spine. It was the only thing that made him stand tall. He sat at the end of the warped laminate table, his fingers hovering over his big four. Black Skull Dragon, Red Eyes Black Dragon, Buster Blader, and the crown jewel, a near-mint Jinzo. Then came the shadow of the school's apex predator, a boy named Rocco. Without a word, Rocco reached down, scooped the cards, and launched them toward the ceiling fans. Spread the wealth, he roared. The cafeteria erupted into a riot of grasping hands. Akira watched in a slow-motion nightmare as his Jinzo was snatched midair by a sixth grader, and his red eyes disappeared into a sea of sneakers. By the time the bell rang, Akira had fought, bartered, and begged his way back to a full deck, but the cards were ruined. They were creased, the foil edges peeled and white. They felt dead. The midnight pact. 2 weeks later, Akira sat behind the bike racks, staring at his mangled Buster Blader. You want them to feel what you felt, a voice rasped. Akira looked up. A man stood in the long shadows of the gymnasium, wearing a trench coat that seemed to absorb the afternoon sun. He didn't look like a duelist. He looked like a debt collector. He held out a single blank card that pulsed with a faint, oily sheen. The shadow games weren't a cartoon. Akira, the man whispered. They were a warning. Sign the back of this card in your own red ink, and you can take him to a place where losing actually means something. Akira, blinded by the heat of his own resentment, didn't ask questions. He bit his lip until it bled and smeared his thumbprint across the card. The final duel, the shadow game, didn't happen in a mystical void. It happened in Rocco's basement on a rainy Tuesday. Rocco laughed when Akira challenged him, thinking it was a joke, until Akira laid the blank card on the table. The lights didn't flicker. They simply ceased to exist. The basement walls seemed to stretch into infinity, turning into cold, damp stone. Rocco's bravado vanished as Akira's monsters began to manifest. These weren't holograms. When Jinzo appeared, it wasn't a sleek cyborg. It was a mass of twitching, stitched flesh and rusted metal that smelled of a hospital dumpster. Akira delivered the final blow. I send you to the shadow realm, he hissed. The floor beneath Rocco's chair didn't open into a purple portal. Instead, the shadows on the wall grew physical. They wrapped around Rocco's throat like oily barbed wire. Rocco didn't disappear in a flash of light. He was slowly, agonizingly pulled into the drywall, his bones snapping with the sound of dry wood. As his body was compressed into a two-dimensional space, his final scream was cut short, muffled by the insulation of the house. The grounded fallout. The police called it a runaway case, but Akira knew better. He had won, but the victory felt like swallowing lead. Weeks passed. Akira's room began to smell of copper and decay. Every time he looked at his deck, the art had changed. The red eyes black dragon now had Caleb's terrified human eyes. One night, the man in the trench coat appeared in Akira's bedroom. He wasn't smiling. The debt is due, the man said. The shadow realm isn't a dimension, Akira. It's a landfill for used-up souls, and the devil doesn't take cards. He takes the hand that played them. The ending. There was no grand battle. There was no heart of the cards to save him. Akira tried to scream, but his jaw felt heavy, Turning to stiff, printed stock, he looked down at his hands and saw them flattening, his skin turning a pale, matte yellow. His room began to blur into a frame of black and gold. The next morning, Akira's mother walked into his room to find it empty. The bed was made, but sitting in the center of his pillow was a single new Yu-Gi-Oh card. It was a level 1 monster, the weakest in the game. The art depicted a small, trembling boy trapped behind iron bars, his face twisted in a silent, permanent wail. The man in the trench coat walked down the street, shuffling the card into a fresh deck. He dropped it on a schoolyard table for the next angry, grieving child to find. The cycle of the game continued, fueled by the souls of children who thought a piece of cardboard was worth a life. The tragedy of Akira serves as a chilling reminder that some prices are far steeper than the rarest foil. In the heat of the schoolyard, it's easy to mistake a game for your entire world. And in that darkness, vengeance feels like the only card left to play. But when we invite monsters into our reality to settle our scores, we eventually find that we've become the very thing we sought to destroy. True strength isn't found in the power to banish your enemies, but in the grit it takes to pick up the pieces of a broken life and move forward without losing your humanity. The moral of the story: anger is a volatile deck to play. If you stake your soul on a win, the house always collects. When you seek a hollow revenge, you don't just lose the game, you lose the player. Keep your deck close and your heart guarded. Don't let a moment of bitterness turn your life into a cautionary tale. Stay sharp, stay kind, and remember, it's just a game until you make it something else. See you at the next table.